Hello, 4 minutes after 10 is the time. I hope you had a cracking weekend. Can we begin? I might make this a bit of a habit on Monday mornings, or a tradition. That's a better word than habit. Can I begin with my problems? I've got some problems at work this morning. Shall we talk through those? Don't worry, Keith, not you, mate. That's a whole show. This is just a sort of 5-minute interlude. Problem number one. I love that story about fraud. I find it absolutely fascinating, and I feel that we have some sort of public service to perform. But as the great Clive Bull once observed, making the phones ring in this job is not the challenge. If you want to make the phones ring, you simply say, is there anybody old out there feeling poorly? And I worry that it might slip into the same category to say, is there anybody old out there who's been scammed? And neither, sadly, these days, since I've been in therapy, can I come on air and be deliberately obnoxious. I no longer find it possible. I said deliberately. Thank you. So I can't say, if you've been scammed, you're clearly stupid. Call me and convince me otherwise. So the challenge for you at 5 minutes after 10 this morning is to come up with a way to discuss the fact that the United Kingdom is truly world-beating when it comes to the number of citizens who are victims of fraud. I challenge you with coming up with a way of making other people's stories about it truly fascinating, scintillating, engaging, and indeed compelling, because they are important. And I would like to find that Rosetta Stone, that skeleton key to unpick the story. Britain is £3 billion fraud capital of the world. Give it 10 minutes, Boris Johnson will be boasting about it, I imagine. What's the other problem I've got? The other problem I've got is I haven't been in court, ever, actually. Well, I tell a lie. I was once removed from the public gallery at Hull Crown Court. Would it be Hull Crown Court or Magistrates Court? It was a school trip, and I don't know whether it was true or not, but we were all absolutely convinced when we were 16 that you were allowed to have an alcoholic drink in the pub as long as you had a meal. So on a school trip, we all went to the pub. I had scampi and chips and a pint of Strongbow, and I fell asleep in the public gallery and was removed by the officer of the court at the order of the judge. At this point in my life, I was thinking about becoming a barrister. Most insufferable show-offs who have a way with words consider becoming barristers at some point in their life, and I was no different. But no, that was the last time I was in court, I think. Did I ever? I don't think. I'm such a rubbish journalist. I don't think I ever covered a court case. Didn't have the shorthand. So, I don't know what it's like. I do know that people have been warning me for a very, very long time that the situation is becoming untenable. One of the people to warn me is somebody whose identity I am not permitted to disclose to you in any way, shape or form. I can't even tell you whether it's a man or a woman. We tossed a coin to decide who would voice the words of the secret barrister, best-selling author and legal commentator, when she came into the studio to be interviewed by me. But that warning lands, if you've read their books. The warning is really acute, and yet it doesn't register. So that intrigues me. 7 minutes after 10 is the time. That intrigues me, the way that we don't know anything about it until we suddenly need to know everything. I know that if you are a victim of crime, it feels as if the wheels of justice move incredibly slowly. Well, look, all right, I should just clarify that. It wasn't a school trip to Hull. It was a work experience. It wasn't like It wasn't like Year 6 went to Thorpe Park and we went to Hull. It was a work experience school trip. So you had to tick a box for the careers you were interested in. I think some kids went off on army manoeuvres, and some of us went to the courtroom in Hull. Thank you, Gordon, for reminding me to clarify that. I don't know what it's like. So what's the best way of doing this? I mean, some of the numbers are staggering in terms of... Oh, that was it. Sorry. I said I was going to talk you through my problems and I forgot the other one. The other problem I've got is when people tell me, when we do relative comparisons of wages, it's very hard to do them without sounding like you're insulting the people who do the job that is historically perceived to be quite low paid. So a pal of mine was moaning the other day about being paid less than somebody who works in a supermarket. And I couldn't talk about that on air because it would be insulting to people who work in a supermarket. So his contention was very much, the job I do is quite highly skilled, and I can't believe that I'm getting such poor pay for it. And I'm like, well, you know, working in a supermarket is not easy. Look what they had to do during coronavirus, and look what they had to do, you know, with obnoxious customers. And now you've got the cost of living. I don't think it's much. I don't think it's a walk in the park. So it's very hard to do that. I think you can probably get there with the amount of training and qualification and possible debt that you have to take on in order to start doing a job. So if I were to say to you that criminal barristers now, junior criminal barristers in their first 3 years of practice, are often putting in about a 70-hour week all told, because there's a heck of a lot of stuff that's done essentially when the meter is not running, i.e. when you're not in court, preparations, travel, they have to travel for miles. I don't think you'll believe me when I tell you that the median income for a junior criminal barrister in their first 3 years of practice, and bear in mind they're coming out of training with up to about £100,000 worth of debt, joining a profession that is historically perceived as being very well paid. What do you reckon they're earning? Median income, their first 3 years, for a junior criminal barrister, straight out of the block, straight out of bar school. Have a guess, go on. What do you think? See, I think you're probably thinking, oh, it's obviously low, because otherwise O'Brien wouldn't be talking about it. 25 grand, that's about the mean. Yeah, 25? You thinking about 20? What are you thinking? You thinking 25? What are you thinking 25? No, £12,200. I mean, forgive me, because I know I am very privileged, but that's buttons, isn't it? It's certainly way, 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 way lower than you would expect a junior criminal barrister to receive. Bob in Norfolk has now pointed out that I was indeed having beer at a work event. It wasn't technically a work event, Bob. It was a school event. It was work experience. I'm going to stop sharing these charming biographical details of my past if you're going to be going over them in such a pedantic fashion, Bob and Adam and others. So here's the challenge at 11 minutes after 10 on Monday morning. I would suggest to you, rightly or wrongly, that barristers or lawyers in general are a sector of society, a sector of the workforce, about whom it's quite hard to persuade people to feel sorry. But I really think we have to. I'm going to play you a 4-minute clip of The Secret Barrister, voiced by a very, very talented young actor who currently works as a producer on the Eddie Mair radio show. But it gives you an indication of how serious matters are, and then we'll do a very quick call to arms, because I want you to tell me what it's like in court at the moment, okay? Here is The Secret Barrister speaking to me about 6 or 7 weeks ago.
One of the things I'm aware of when I'm talking about and campaigning about legal aid cuts at the moment, as I'm sure you know, there is action being taken by the criminal bar because of the cuts to legal aid.
Yes.
And because the government, in particular Dominic Raab, our esteemed Lord Chancellor, is, despite having commissioned an independent report 3 years ago, is simply ignoring its conclusions because he doesn't like them. And so as a result, we're taking very limited professional action to try and address that. And I'm aware that when I'm mounting my high horse and shouting about this, that it would be easy, and indeed it happens that people point their fingers and say, well, come on, you're hardly doing too badly, are you? But the point is that the criminal bar is sustainable for me because I'm very, very lucky to have a second job. And because I'm in a very unusual position of having a very good clerk who sends a lot more work my way than my talents probably justify. But that's the problem is that there's a whole swathe of professionals who can't make it sustainable. People in the first 3 years of criminal practice are earning on average £12,000 a year.
Some of those stories are unbelievable.
Well, they are. We're all self-employed. Our overheads, our chambers, rent, the staff we have to pay, our clerks, pension holiday, but you can disregard that. But it means that we take home roughly 35 to 40% of what we actually gross. We're our own little businesses, so to speak. So for those people in the early years of practice, it's completely unsustainable. It's not even as if the hours mean you could go and get a second job. You can't. It's so engrossing and the hours are so punishing. And what we see really is a squeeze where people starting the profession are struggling to get off the first rung. And then when they hit the 10-year mark, they find that the work-life balance is simply unsustainable. There's no way you can maintain a healthy family life. It's extremely difficult to maintain a healthy family and social life working full-time and at the criminal bar. It just is. These things are so unpredictable. The conditions are so variable. You don't know where you're going to be from one day to the next until 6 p.m. the night before. You never know where the next paycheck is coming from. And it's extremely difficult to have a stable existence. And what we find, therefore, is that around that 10-year mark, people just give up. They move on into other areas of the law, or they leave the criminal bar, or leave the bar altogether. And so the upshot is there now just aren't enough of us. And while we had huge delays for years throughout the system for the reasons I've said, funding cuts, we've now got this unheard of problem. And again, it's a problem that Dominic Raab has for the past year pretended doesn't exist. He's denied it.
He's literally looked the other way.
Well, no, it's worse than that. When the Criminal Bar Association, which is our representative body, has been sounding alarms and saying, look, trials are currently being adjourned because there are no barristers to prosecute or defend them, there just aren't enough people. And the Ministry of Justice has just said that's not true.
Sheesh.
And we've then presented them with the figures that show that there's been 50 times as many trials being adjourned for that reason in the last quarter of last year than there were the year before.
50 times as many.
It's an enormous problem, and we see it happening more and more and more. And it's a difficult thing to get the public exercised about because, you know, fat cat.
I've heard fat cat lawyers for all the reasons we've discussed, because you don't have the regard or the respect that you clearly should have, which is also a big part of your mission.
Well, I mean, I'm not.
All right, not regard and respect, just value. The value to us personally that your profession provides.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think we gave up a long time ago on winning the battle of the hearts and minds.
The beauty contest.
The beauty contest. But I think just people recognising in the same way, again, to use the health analogy, that we instinctively understand if there aren't enough nurses and aren't enough doctors, that is a very bad thing. It doesn't matter that we haven't got an appointment booked next week. That is a bad thing for society. But it's understanding that actually, if there aren't enough criminal barristers to prosecute and defend cases, that is equally bad. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, the message that we need to try and get home.
So there it is. I mean, it is incredibly difficult to muster public sympathy for lawyers in general, barristers in particular, and criminal barristers especially. And I'm going to try today because this is really deadly serious. The rewards, if you like, or the remuneration that they receive is a relative pittance considering the amount of training that is necessary, the amount of debt that they accrue, and crucially, I would argue, the importance of the job that they do. You're looking at about 81.5% of the votes cast being in support of the action. As if they weren't already suffering enough, the Justice Secretary is currently Dominic Raab, who said that the strikes were regrettable and would only delay justice for victims. Here's what I want to know from you. I hope there are barristers listening who can just ring in and talk us through the reality of your existence. Why have you voted to go on strike? 0345 60 60973. If you're a barrister but you're not in this category or you're not part of the industrial action, then give your colleagues a shout. Feel free also to criticise them, as ever on the programme. That's the nature of the game. But just talk us through why this legal action is happening, either from the perspective of being part of it or being the perspective of an informed observer or colleague, okay? And now I want to know what it's like to be a client, either because you have been accused of a crime or because you have been a victim of crime. What is the court system currently like? Because it's such a bizarre subject, this. I don't think I've articulated this very well. It's such a bizarre subject. It's so intrinsic to our society. Laws are really what define civilization. It's why having a prime minister and a government that treat laws with contempt and try and paint targets on the back of lawyers, almost literally when it comes to immigration law, is so scary. But they are the difference between civilization and not. But we know nothing about it until we're there, until we're right there. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. If you are waiting for a court date, or if you have been a victim of crime, or even if you're accused of a crime as it stands, although I grant you're probably less likely to ring me, give us a call and just let the rest of us know what the picture is like currently in British criminal courts. 0345 6060 973. So there are two questions here. The first is, why is this industrial action taking place? Give us the detail. 0345 6060 973. And the second is, what is the situation like in the British courts right now? And I want you to remember, if you're thinking, I don't know if I should ring in, I want you to remember 90%, 95%, possibly 99% of people listening to this programme will not currently have a clue. So whatever window it is you've been looking through, it's a window that most of us don't have access to. It is 21 minutes after 10. I should probably add that I was first told about this. So my dad was still alive, which means it was pre-2012. An old family friend who's a barrister who just told me he was going to retire early because of what was on the horizon. He said if you were now contemplating going to the bar to be a criminal barrister, which was on my list of possibilities as a young chap, he said I would talk you out of it. A lot of people, for what it's worth, feel the same about journalism these days, so God knows what I would have done what I would be aiming for if I was 18 now, but I want the what and the why of it. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need. Let's start with Jonathan, who's in Leicester. Jonathan, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, because I'm a criminal barrister, and I figure I'm probably about the best person you can speak to about this.
Well, I tell you what, with self-confidence like that, you're in very good company, Jonathan.
No, seriously. I mean, I happen to be in court today because I'm prosecuting, not defending. But if I was defending, I'd be out.
Right.
The bottom line is that the government commissioned a report.
They did.
Which was published last November with a view to saving or, stopping the decline of the criminal justice system.
I think about a quarter of criminal barristers have left the profession in the last few years.
That's true, yeah. And 567 trials last year were abandoned because there weren't enough of us.
Right, let me pause you there. Let me pause you there, because although I am quite sure that by according to your own testimony, you are the best possible person we could be talking to about this, my job is to remind you of the stuff that perhaps listeners won't know, even though it's second nature and part of the quotidian experience for you. So talk us through what happens when a trial is abandoned and how far typically down the road will that trial have gone before it is called off, as it were?
Well, it will have had a number of hearings before it even gets to that point.
So this is money spent, emotion expended, effort exerted, and then they just literally call it off.
Well, yeah, because if you haven't got two people there, one on either side, if you've only got one of them, you can't have a trial.
This is what I mean by having to remind you that not everyone listening will know anything about your profession. So how can you? So you literally don't have a defence barrister turning up, or a prosecution barrister,
or a prosecution barrister, indeed.
And there's no one there to replace them. And this is part of the industrial action, isn't it? That you're not going to step in to take on work for colleagues whose cases have overrun. So if I've got two cases on the go and I'm expected in court next week on one of them, but the one that I was in court this week with overruns, I can't turn up in court next week.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you,
yes,
it is something that none of us have seen before.
Right.
The idea that there aren't enough people to turn up to prosecute or defend is a really new phenomenon. And what can we do? There aren't young people wanting to come into the job. I don't know what to say.
Well, that's what I can pick up, because you're as if, you're a bit like the boy in the crowd pointing out the nudity of the emperor. It is to barristers, the crisis is so self-evident that they can't quite believe it needs to be articulated, and yet for the rest of the country, A, it's not the most sympathetic of professions, rightly or wrongly. B, you don't know anything about this until you're absolutely up against it, and C, everyone still thinks you earn a fortune.
Yeah, there is no point us worrying about getting the public support on this, because we recognise that we're not going to get public support because people think we all earn a fortune. But the reality is that we don't. To us, it is self-evident, and to victims of crime, to witnesses, to anyone involved in the system, the idea that you turn up on your trial. So, for example, I've got a trial today. Yeah. I'm about to walk into court, and I know that my opponent is not going to be there because he's taking the day of action, and I know that it will go off. Now, okay, today is a special day because he's not there for a particular reason. Yes. But equally, last week, I could have turned up to court to find there was no one else. No one there to defend or prosecute because there are not enough of us. It's so frustrating.
Clearly. No, it's
We
okay.
have
We will do our bit to muster up some sort of public sympathy or some level of public support, because, of course, what you've described is a situation in which you're a victim of crime. You wait years to come to court. You get to court, and the case can't go ahead because people have been detained with their previous case, or they. I mean, there's simply no one there. It is actually incredible. I felt that what Jonathan didn't say, I felt the frustration in his voice. And this is a barrister. This is a professionally fluid speaker. But the sense of it is really acute. And it was similar with the secret barrister as well. So a couple of points to clarify. If you're quibbling, and I don't think anyone's doing it pedantically, I think it's genuine confusion. The money, the idea that you can end up on less than minimum wage, it's pretty straightforward. You get 13 hours. You're looking at about 250 quid, looking at an hourly rate of almost £20. But barristers say the time they spend preparing cases means that their hourly earnings will be below the minimum wage. So it's not like this job where you can just turn up and start talking. You've got to do a lot of research. You've got to read a lot of documentation. I know I sometimes read stuff as well, but I'm just exaggerating for comic effect. That's why once they've put in the hours and divided that by the total fee, it is coming in at less than minimum wage. And that is unbelievable. A couple of texts that really highlight the point here. Brian in Lisbon, I'll come to you first after the news, but this is really interesting because here is the problem that Jonathan was trying to articulate. This is a text from Andrew, who's in Chorley. He says, I needed a barrister a few years ago for a child custody battle. Now, my little alarm's already gone off. So that's what I'm thinking. That's not a criminal barrister, mate. I really hope you're not going to let your experiences out in civil law impact upon your opinion about what these criminal lawyers are doing. But of course he is. They wanted £1,000 an hour. I simply couldn't afford it. So sadly, my sympathy for that level is zero. But I do feel for the younger generation of legal people who are struggling just like the working class are. So Andrew sent that at 10:19. Robin sent this at 10:15. James, I'm a civil barrister instructed on private fees. The biggest issue for criminal barristers is that the public confuse the amount that they would have to pay privately for a civil barrister with the amounts that the criminal bar is required to charge. So Robin literally predicting Andrew's text. The civil bar is well remunerated. The criminal bar is not. Of course, we civil counsel argue about money, which is obviously far more important than arguing about the liberty of a person charged with a crime. That's sarcasm, in case you were doubting it. It is scandalous, and unless it is dealt with, the criminal justice system cannot continue to operate. This is what I want you to talk to me about next. An existential threat to our criminal justice system. Simple question, is that an exaggeration? Is the criminal justice system in England and Wales facing an existential threat? 03456060973. In other words, could we be halfway through 2022 in the sunlit uplands of Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain, could we actually be contemplating some form of collapse of our criminal justice system? Or, dare I say it, are we already teetering on the brink? Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. It is 10:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. As Julie reminds us, anyone wrongly accused of committing a crime also needs a timely trial and a good defence lawyer. Let's open it up now. We'll continue talking to barristers in just a moment. I've got two waiting, but I want to talk to you about your day in court as well. I mean, 567 court cases just sort of adjourned at the last minute because there simply wasn't a prosecuting or defence barrister available. I completely get now the frustration of the first caller, because it's as if you're shouting fire, and there is a fire, and everyone's just carrying on as normal, including the government. And arguably the government are making it worse, not just by pointing absolute balloons like Dominic Raab and Suella Braverman to key legal positions, which is adding insult to injury, but also, of course, by continuing to demonise lawyers, who you most recently heard referred to as lefty lawyers. In the context of the despicable Rwandan deportation debacle. So it is really scary. Why should I care about the criminal justice system? Answer, because if you're a victim of crime or you're wrongly accused of a crime, you want to get justice. Why should I care about justice? And again, we're living in a country where people have been persuaded to celebrate the abolition of their own freedom of movement, and they're now being softened up to celebrate the surrendering of their own human rights. So it is not beyond especially when you look at what happened in America on Friday with Roe versus Wade. It is not beyond my contemplations to imagine elements of this country celebrating the removal of their access to justice on the grounds that, well, the only people who care about courts are criminals or some such nonsense. Brian's in Lisburn in Northern Ireland. Brian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think what a lot of people don't realise is the cost of actually becoming a barrister.
Yeah.
Now, you go and do your law degree, and then maybe you do your master's, and then you go to your civic legal studies. You then take on a 6-month pupillage. You then, once you are called to the bar, and you have to pay your fees. If you're over 25, that's the full fee. When I did it, it was £5,000. So the second 6 months of that year, after you take all your fees out of everything, and your travel expenses and everything else, and your bar fees, you make £50.
It's incredible, right? £50. There's a junior barrister who's just been speaking at the gathering, the demonstration outside the Old Bailey. So she grew up on a council estate. She went to a state school. She relied entirely on scholarships and loans to get to the bar, but now faces years working for less than the minimum wage. Why? I mean, I'll ask you a little bit more about your personal circumstances in a second, but how do you account for the way that this has been allowed to develop? Because some people have been shouting the odds for quite a long time. The alarms have been ringing for quite a long time. How do you account for the fact that let's just pick on the media, the political establishment and the public have just not noticed? They haven't cared enough. They haven't heeded these alarms. They haven't registered them.
Because traditionally it's seen that barristers and solicitors are all on the gravy train, all making a fortune. You'll get the ones who are making a lot of money, and that's where the media concentrates on.
Yeah.
For example, Bloody Sunday inquiry here in Northern Ireland, 10 years. The barristers on that made a hell of a lot of money, and the media would concentrate on, look how rich the barristers are, look how much money the barristers have got, look how much legal cars they're driving, etc.
Yes.
Whereas they don't seem to see the people who aren't actually involved in that sort of thing.
Sure, the people dealing with a shoplifting case or a drug dealing case in the court down the road are not the ones that you read about in the newspapers.
Exactly.
What did you do then after realising that the return you were going to get on the investment in your training? I mean, you were a mature student. I think you were a policeman before you trained as a lawyer. So, I mean, a fascinating. What did you do?
Went back to retirement.
Did you? You just knocked it on the head completely and chalked up the money you'd spent on training as a unfortunate extravagance.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I actually had a colleague who actually stayed on, and at the end of her second year, she had to give up her flat, sell her car, move back home with her parents, and actually borrow the parents' car every day she was having to work, because I think she was only making £6,000 or £7,000 in the second year.
Wow.
And I say fair play to the ones that actually stick at it and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Some of the numbers are staggering. The chairman of the Criminal Bar Association said that almost 40% of junior criminal barristers left the profession in 1 year. So they do that's you, isn't it? They do what you do. They do their first case or their second, and then they look at the road ahead and they think, how the hell am I going to be able to keep this up? I'm out of here.
And trust me, I was getting work because of my previous experience. But it would need to be a hell of a lot better paid, because it just wasn't financially viable. You know, and whenever I started working, my pension was frozen because I was back working full time.
Oh, I see what you mean. And finally, what does actual collapse look like, and how far away from it are we? I mean, what happens if these numbers go up? If 567 last year, what happens if it's 700 next year, 1,000 the year after?
Well, if you take, everybody talks about the Conservatives and austerity for the last 12 years. It's austerity across the board. They're not investing. In fact, they go to for example, in Northern Ireland, the Department of Finance, and say we need you to reduce your cost by 25% this year. Mm. And where are those costs taken from? You know, they have to be taken from somewhere. The police in Northern Ireland have got a shortfall of something like 60 million. Yeah. And given that under Patton, the police should have more than 5,000 more officers by now, as part of the agreement, where they're actually reducing officers, and they've got a £60 million deficit. That's one part of the legal system. The Department of Justice then have to take drastic action in civil defence, in legal defence, in legal aid. Every aspect of the criminal justice system is going to be has been taken wealth out of it, and it can't run on a shoestring, so it will collapse. And I'm talking about if nothing's done within 3 or 4 years.
Well, I think you. I mean, you're a lot closer to the action than I am. I'd be interested if anyone wants to disagree with you, but it is well, a crazy business, and there's a real sense underpinning the entire programme today of not being able to fully communicate to people what a serious story this is. Partly because we still perceive barristers as being very comfortable, and yet the average median income is £12,200 a year. So the junior criminal barristers, and let's just focus on a couple of things, because legal aid obviously is your recourse when you can't afford or you can't afford to instruct your own barrister. This is the money you get, if you like, to fund criminal action from the government, as it were, from the taxpayer. So I guess the richer you are, the less likely you are to be affected by this. I don't know whether it's fair to say that Conservative MPs are going to be looking at this and say, well, if you need legal aid, then, well, you know, or something like that. Looking for reasons why this has been allowed to wither on the vine in this fashion, but I don't know if that counts as one. So have a crack at that. Why has this been allowed? Why is the criminal justice system being left to wither on the vine by this government? 03456060973. John's in Nottingham. John, what would you like to say?
So I had a case in a magistrates court back in February of 2020,
right?
And so my case was dealt with during COVID, which obviously complicated things,
of course,
quite considerably more. And it was a relatively sort of simplistic case, and it was the trial itself was dealt with inside 2 hours, but the whole thing was pushed back. Originally a date I believe was set for April or May, and it ended up being dealt with in October. So it was, you know, the whole thing was pushed back somewhere around 8 months, and in which time both defendants and victims, and in some cases witnesses, are, you know, just in complete limbo where they can't do anything.
And the bigger the case, the bigger the accusation, the harder the limbo for victim or accused, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Which were you, if you don't mind me asking?
I was the defendant.
Okay. Did you do it?
No, I was acquitted.
So you had 8 months of people thinking, well, there's no smoke without fire. Does everybody know? Did it make the local paper?
No, it didn't make the local paper.
Relief.
No.
What were you accused of, if you don't mind me asking?
I prefer not to say, if that's okay.
Okay, but it was something that if you did say, obviously people would arrive at conclusions about you, which you would not want them to arrive at. Otherwise, you'd tell me.
Absolutely.
And that's even as someone who was acquitted. You still don't want it even to know that the accusation was made in the first place.
Yeah, indeed.
That's it, isn't it? Everyone knows. Your family know, do they? Colleagues?
Yeah, family, colleagues, friends, you know, they were all with me throughout it. It was an extraordinarily trying ordeal, and it was held in a magistrates court, which is, you know, obviously the amount of preparation required, and, you know, you don't need a jury, you don't need barristers for that. It's solicitors and magistrates.
Yeah,
so it's more simplistic to you know, put together a trial, as it were, and yet that still took an enormous amount of time. I mean, partly due to a pandemic, but, you know.
Yes, and you're giving us the domino effect, I suppose. If this is happening in criminal courts, then obviously it's gonna filter down to magistrates' courts as well, and you have that. And even if you had been guilty, people listening to the programme would still want it to be settled quickly. You still don't. I mean, because that is it's. So I mean, where do you stand on the industrial action then? Incidentally.
I think the industrial action is completely warranted. You know, aside from a shortage, £12,500 for a junior barrister is simply not feasible. You can't live on that.
I'm going to ask how it's happened, actually. I mean, junior barristers, past or present, just to talk us through how this has crept up on a way. Because I do remember, I think would it be about 2008 or someone thereabouts, just simply telling me that it was. They measure it back to 2006 when they look at how much the income has been cut by, an average fall of 28% in real earnings since 2006. That's barristers in general. I wonder how this has been allowed to develop, allowed to ferment like this. Sean Jones QC is following events. He's down at the Old Bailey. He's a specialist employment and sports law QC. So again, I mean, he'll be, like my earlier correspondent, someone who's very well remunerated or relatively well remunerated, but concerned about the existential threat to his own profession. And he's attending the demonstration outside the Old Bailey, or the Central Criminal Court, as it's known. My overall impression of the strike this morning is a disorientating mix of profound sadness that the criminal justice system could have been allowed to reach its present state of crisis, and being inspired by what a formidable bunch of fighters the criminal bar is. It's funny that, isn't it? Because we've got the first half of that on the programme this morning, a profound sadness, a disorientating mix of profound sadness at the criminal justice system. We haven't got the formidable bunch of fighters at the criminal bar is element of the conversation, although I suppose the clip I played you 40 minutes ago or so of the secret barrister explaining and indeed predicting today's events was pretty helpful. The time now is 10:45. 10:48 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's a nasty air around this legal action being taken by barristers, because the more that you look at it, the more you wonder whether they are really screaming at the top of their lungs about an iceberg that they've already hit. The hopes of hitting reverse and changing course seem to hinge upon, to a degree, the success of this action. Emma is in Guildford. Emma, what would you like to say?
Hi there. I'm actually at court right now because I voted to strike, but the judge in my case told me that if I did go on strike, my name would be sent to a presiding judge for the area of the court,
right,
with a view to be sent on for a sanction. So I've been told if I engage in the strike, there's going to be a sanction.
I was about to ask you what the legality of that is, which is a slightly ironic question to ask, isn't it? But do you know? Is that because we've already spoken to one barrister whose opposite number won't be in court today because they are taking action today. So is that just at a judge's discretion, that sort of decision?
Well, the Lord Chief Justice passed down an edict that the judge in our area has interpreted as a mandatory referral to the presiding judge, and they say that's the background for it. That is not a decision being taken by every judge. That is just a decision being taken by this judge. I've taken advice from the Criminal Bar Association, who have been lovely.
Yes.
This is our judges interpreting it differently and wrongly, and as a consequence I'm now terrified that if I engage in a strike to save my career down the line,
right,
my career could be over because I'll have a sanction against me, and I'm very, very junior.
Gosh. I mean, I think, for what it's worth, if you're remotely interested in my opinion, I think you've done the right thing, because you number one, your brothers and sisters in the law are out there taking the fight to the public and explaining the situation, but you at some point have to look after number one as well. But the question of, I think you're still perfectly, I'm delighted to give you a chance to answer the question of why you voted for this industrial action. What is the existential threat either to your career or your profession, or both, whatever you prefer?
I mean, I voted to strike because the pay is just awful. The work conditions are just awful. I have no issue telling you. I earned about £17,000 last year, and that wasn't through lack of trying. If I got married last year, if I want to start a family, if I want to do something with my partner outside of the law, I can just forget it. And I worked so hard for this. You know, my parents don't have savings to put me through law school and bar school, and it shouldn't be right that several years later I still have to think about it and potentially leaving and throwing it in. That's just so wrong on every level.
What about people who say, and I mean, you as a barrister will allow me a little bit of devil's advocacy, people who say you knew what you were signing up for?
That's right. It is right to a certain degree, but it shouldn't be that after 7 years of studying and 3 years of practice that there is no different. We knew we were signing up to it. Nobody signs up to this job to work in criminal law to make loads of money. Nobody does that. Nobody. But to understand, to say, well, you can be in this career for 3 years and, oh, by the way, your pay won't increase. In fact, it might decrease. And, oh, by the way, if you're in this for 10 years, your pay probably won't increase, really. That's what's so wrong. We're not asking for millions. We're just asking for what is fair.
Or even just less unfair. I don't know what the definition of fair would be. What sort of, how many of your peers have you seen jack it in since you qualified?
Oh, so many. One of my closest friends.
Yeah.
We studied together, and she left. because she just flat out couldn't afford it. She wanted to own a property one day and could not afford to do that as a criminal barrister. She left.
It's incredible to think of that relationship between training, qualification, debt, and then remuneration in the earliest years. Can I ask roughly what sort of debt you had when you first took up your pupillage?
Oh, upwards of 20.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's relative. Some people have got a lot more than that. But that's just your legal fees. That's not including your first degree.
Oh, no, that's not including my student debt.
No,
It's including my student debt. It's about 60, 70.
Yeah, I'm sorry for asking. You'd probably rather not to think about it. It's just, it's and you make a brilliant point in that it limits your freedoms in so many other areas of life, unless you win the lottery or fall in love with someone who's absolutely minted. Property ownership is a distant dream for people in your sort of situation.
Oh, quite. I've given up the idea that I will own a house or a flat. That is just not something that I can do if I'm a criminal barrister. I have to make that choice, and that's devastating, but it's true. And I've chosen my career. Can I continue to make that decision every day? And that's the struggle, because right now I'm really, really struggling to do that.
And today's been a kick in the teeth, I think, for you as well, hasn't it, with this presiding judge?
It has. It's really a real shame, because I know many, many other judges up and down the country have taken a completely different view. And it's just absolutely awful. And I cannot put words to how it feels to be forced to go into court or lose your career if you don't. I can't even put words to that feeling.
No, well, you have, if it's any consolation. So
Thank you.
No, thank you. And I'll ask another caller what the light at the end of the tunnel looks like, because I think we'll just leave that thought hanging of you being essentially ordered upon pain of career damage not to take the democratically mandated and legal industrial action that you voted for. You suggest you think the judge has got their interpretation wrong. I mean, just statistically, it would seem that you're right, because more judges than not have gone in precisely the opposite direction. Mark's in Woodford. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I'm a junior barrister, known more like a baby barrister. I've been barrister for 18 months now.
Okay.
So I can say what it's like from the beginning. I mean, prior to that, I would say I was a solicitor for all of 5 months, a criminal defence solicitor.
Okay.
The reason I transferred to the bar is because, quite frankly, as a barrister in 3-4 years of your call, you'll probably out-earn a criminal defence solicitor who's been in the job for 15 years. Things are that bad at the moment across the board, and it's not being talked about. I can remember when I started as a barrister in the magistrates' courts, the average pay, and I was kept in Bromley magistrates' courts for 6 hours once. I got £50 for that day. Yeah. So let that sink in, for all the reading I had to do, for all how long I was on my feet, and I wasn't released from that court until about 5 o'clock in the evening, when I was there from 10 o'clock. And this continued. My first 3-4 months in practice as a junior, I was earning, sometimes I saw like £600 a month, if I was lucky. Thankfully, I've got some amazing clerks, and they literally jet-propelled me into Crown Court trials,
right,
which it really did make the difference. And I have a really solid defence practice, but the point is most juniors are not so fortunate, and they're in the magistrates a lot more longer, and the pay is appalling. It's like £75 for a half-day trial, £50 for a hearing, £150 for a full day's trial, plus you have to wait until the solicitor decides to build a case and finishes the case. And making a living with the work that you're demanded of to do these mags trials is just a joke.
It's breathtaking, isn't it? I mean, it's shocking is the word that I would use, and yet I knew some of this detail. Just speak for a moment, if you can, on this disconnect between the reality and the public perception, because even I sit here listening to you and to Emma and to everybody who's rung in today, and I still can't quite believe you earn so little. Here's another example, quite a well-known barrister, I mean, one of the Legal 500's absolute stars, Joanna Hardy-Suskind, who I follow on Twitter. One day last week, I got up at 5 a.m, drove a 108-mile round trip, prepped a fairly large case, advised a client who may go to prison, conducted the court hearing, and then wrote everything up. And my fee was £126.
That's for a PTPH, so that's for a pre-trial preparation hearing. Average mention, £91. Obviously, trial territory, you get paid a bit better.
Sure.
But the problem is that we don't get paid for the prep work that we do, and it's hours of legal research. I mean, the travel is a lot. I mean, I was travelling so much when I first started. I mean, my first few trials were Stoke-on-Trent, Birmingham Crown Court. I did Leeds, and I mean, the thing, it nearly cost me my marriage, if I'm honest with you,
I'm not
because
surprised.
I was staying away from home so much, and I'm up working until God midnight when my wife's a teacher, and he's going to bed at 9, 10 o'clock.
Yes.
Teacher, another range of issues. But let me just break, if I may, the public perception
Yes.
of what they think of us. Imagine now, not you personally, James, but someone's driving down Chiswick High Street on about 3:30 in the afternoon. A child of 5 runs out in front of your car. Witnesses say that you were speeding. You know you were not.
Right.
You end up getting charged for that.
Yeah.
You end up in the magistrates' court. The magistrates decline jurisdiction. You're sent to the Crown Court charged with dangerous driving. Who are you going to call? And it's not Ghostbusters. You're going to call a solicitor, and you're going to need a barrister.
Yeah.
And this, you might have been of good character, paid all your taxes on time, don't even drink, because there's a lot of the public, they're on this, we've done nothing wrong.
Couldn't be me. It doesn't happen to me. It couldn't happen to people like me. Wouldn't happen to someone like me.
A child could run out in front of your car. That's all it takes, James. And people forget that the amount of people that I've represented who are upstanding citizens, impeccable citizens, and they've one mistake, one falsely accused thing, a malicious allegation.
Yeah.
Let me talk about, that's how I got into the profession in the first place. I was falsely accused of assault. I ended up representing myself in the Crown Court. That's how I got into the job. All it takes is a malicious allegation, and I was fortunate I got through it, and that's inspired me to be a barrister. But the amount of people out there that are falsely accused of things they have generally not done, it's so unfair. And I've seen case after case. Another guy that I represented, 60 years an employee, falsely accused of sexual assault, totally made up, and it came out during the trial, but he waited 3 years for his trial. And he was 74 years old.
And that's 3 years. That's 3 years of hell, right? Even if you know you're innocent. I mean, it's crucible territory, this, isn't it? It's my good name. That's
and the public don't understand this, and it's like they think that we're a bunch of fat cats. We're living off the cream of the land. And I'm not going to if you do well and after years and you build practice, you can be, the rumination does change from when you're a junior to a mid-level junior. But in the beginning, it's awful. I've seen so much of my friends just leave the criminal bar lately. They've gone to do civil and family law. I mean, when I was studying my undergrad in 2015, I think there was rumored to be about 5,000 barristers. Now there's 2,200, and something needs to be done, and the government need to take it seriously. I will say that the cuts happened under Labour as well.
They did, yeah. When the Ministry of Justice, we're going back to Blair's premiership, ultimately.
I'm not going to let them get away with it. I noticed that Keir Starmer and them were very quiet when these things come up, and it's not a vote winner, but the fact is anyone, James, can be accused of a crime.
You've made a great case, if you'd pardon that slightly clumsy pun. You really have, because that idea that it could be you, whether or not you are, something terrible happens and culpability needs to be determined, or if you're the victim of a false allegation, there's not a lot you can do about that. They need to be investigated, and rightly so. But of course, the speed with which it happens is going to impact directly upon the damage it will do to your mental health, and even in the short term, your reputation. Mark, thank you. I tell you what, I wish we had longer. Your story about how you came to the bar through that false accusation and defending yourself. Obviously, you're far too busy being a lawyer, but that would make a cracking tale, wouldn't it? It's 11:01. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. I won't dwell on this unduly, because I don't think it's going to be a very uplifting contemplation, but the country I grew up in is changing. And I don't mean this in a kind of lazy UKIP-y way. There's too many people speaking foreign on trains. I mean, it's changing in the sense of the old order of things. You'd have thought, go to law school, and there's elements of luck and effort at all of those stages. Get into a decent university, or get a decent degree, get into law school, or get a pupillage. Lots of people don't get pupillage, get a barrack, get a job, and then you'd think, no, I'm set up for life, but that's a good profession, that's a solid career. Simply not true anymore. Simply not true anymore. And then you look at junior doctors who are thinking of taking industrial action soon. I said to you some time ago, you probably weren't listening. I don't mean that in a funny way. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how much the audience of this programme has grown in recent years, probably since Brexit. Hey, there's a benefit of Brexit. There you go. No one had ever heard of James O'Brien before Brexit came along. And anyway, so I said to you some time ago that there's a psychological and a philosophical shift in our society. And I don't know if this is true in other countries. I think it's always been true in America. But it didn't used to be the Anglo-Saxon way. It didn't used to be the British way, where making money is the only really well-rewarded profession. As in moving money, making money, working in finance. I was reading about Glastonbury at the weekend, and all of the people in the 12 grand tents. You apparently can rent a tent for £7,000, and it's got, I don't know, a jacuzzi and a Generation Game conveyor belt in it. And they all work in finance. I don't know. I've got friends that work in finance. I don't really know what it means, but it means that you work with money. You make money out of money. Those now are the only jobs where, unless you're like a rock star or incredibly lucky to have got to the top of a very big tree, and there's not many branches at the very top. All of these jobs now. Do you remember when teachers had both respect and remuneration? Commensurate with what you'd expect teachers to have when we were growing up. I'm 50, by the way. I was born in 1972. But growing up, parents who were teachers, they weren't like lagging behind economically or socially. Barristers, my family friends who were barristers were quite well off. My father was a Daily Telegraph journalist, and we would have friends who were teachers, friends who were barristers. I mean, there is no job now, unless it's a made-up lucky job like this, where you can earn the kind of salaries that would be normal ones in return for effort, exertion. Look, some privilege and luck. Of course, some of these doors are a lot easier to get through if you went to the right school or your dad's got a friend who did this. But I know that. That's just the nature of reality. But now as you look across junior doctors, dentists, lawyer, what are the professions now? I quite like the blurring of the line between the trades and the professions. I think if you're a really good plumber or a really good electrician, then you should actually have historically had similar levels of respect to really good doctors, really good dentists. I mean, there might be a slight difference in training levels, but to me, I'd entrust my life to an electrician more often than I entrust my life to a doctor, as it goes. But what are the professions now? Where are they? It's really weird. And it's the sort of stuff that happens in a society all the time. And what you have now, of course, as you could see at that fundraising ball last week, you have a party of government that cares only about people who deal in money. No one's going to pay 120 grand to have dinner with David Cameron, Theresa May, and who's the other one? Boris Johnson. If they've made their money doing something of benefit to society, if they've made their money looking after people or doing the right thing, who is the party of government currently wooing? A sort of mega-rich son of a KGB spy gets a seat in the House of Lords because he can afford to buy newspapers or whatever it may be. And then another Russian bidding for lots galore at this Conservative Party fundraising thing. And of course, it's a world in which if you have the right school tie and you have the right connections, even an absolute half-wit like Jacob Rees-Mogg can make millions and millions of pounds investing other people's money. It's not right. It's not normal. I don't see any way out of it, but I think baby step towards improvement would be recognising the importance of well-trained professionals, or indeed experts, as we sometimes call them. I digress slightly, because we are, in fact, going to turn our attention next to that story. Daily Mail. I love it when the Daily Mail does this. Occasionally, and I know it's a bit of a pet subject of mine, and you're probably not as animated by it as I am, they do really good campaigns sometimes. So, cleaning up Britain or getting rid of plastic bags. They do really good campaigns. And at the moment, their campaigns are really important because the Daily Mail is desperately trying to persuade you to forget that they are responsible in large part for that vote in 2016, which saw the United Kingdom become the only country in history to impose economic sanctions on itself. If you look back at some of the front pages, presided over by a man who's about to be put in the House of Lords by Boris Johnson, you look back at some of those front pages, you could be forgiven for thinking that they were parodies. Whether he was attacking judges, whether he was attacking Parliament, whether he was attacking MPs, whether he was attacking the House of Lords that he's desperate to be in. I mean, the hypocrisy and the sort of bigotry of the editorial views expressed by the Daily Mail over the last 10 years are absolutely off the scale. And because they can't possibly mention Brexit ever in a negative light, Nick Cohen wrote a brilliant piece in The Observer yesterday. I don't know if you saw it. Nobody really in the Conservative Party, the right-wing media, all those ludicrous lobby groups masquerading as think tanks, none of them can tell the truth about Brexit without losing their jobs. So the Daily Mail needs desperately to persuade you that it cares. So it does occasionally accidentally do quite cool stuff, like today's investigation into £3 billion worth of fraud. Britain has become the global capital of fraud. £3 billion a year going into the pockets of criminals. The per-person losses in the UK, they reckon, are far higher than in other leading Western economies, which we still just about qualify as, and that would include America, Canada and Australia. So that's going to be one of the questions I ask you this hour, is why? Why is Britain so much worse than other countries? Who can answer that question? I don't know who's going to have a foot in both camps. And then Martin Lewis is the person who I turn to for issues of probity and trust, probably more than any others. He's had his application to the House of Lords turned down again, he revealed a couple of weeks ago. That's Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain, where Paul Dacre gets a seat in the House of Lords and Martin Lewis does not. Who do you think's done more for the general welfare of the average Brit? The bloke who edited the newspaper that did more than any other to turn Britain into an economic basket case, or the man who set up the money saving expert and saved individual households untold sums of money over decades anyway. 12 minutes after 11 is the time. Martin Lewis is the reason why I'm not going to do this topic in a way that I would have done once. That and therapy, endeavouring to be a slightly better person and not being up for a fight all the time. 10 years ago, if you tuned into this radio station, I would be flirting now with the idea of calling you stupid. I would genuinely be flirting with the idea of saying, look, if you've fallen for one of these scams, I get one or two a day. You get some weird text on your phone, or you get something on the internet. I mean, how can anyone be so stupid as to fall for these scams? But I'm not going to do that for two reasons. Number one, it wouldn't actually be sincere anymore. I don't think like that. And if I pretend to in order to get a reaction out of you, then I'll be working for one of those weird new TV stations by tea time. I can't adopt a faux personality or fake opinions in order to muster up some poxy, half-arsed controversy. So you insert into this available gap whichever, quote, media figure, end quote, you prefer. So I can't do it because it would be inauthentic and insincere, and I'm not going to fake outrage or fake obnoxiousness for clicks and giggles. And the second reason is I actually feel really sorry for you. And Martin Lewis's description of how angry, you see smoke coming out of Martin's ears when he talks about the scammers that use his face on Facebook adverts to draw people to a website where they'll just be flogging it. I mean, it's an old con. They'll just be flogging empty boxes. You'll sign up for some face cream and it will never exist. But because Martin's face is often used as the portal, because he is so trusted and so respected, it makes his blood boil. Seriously. The man spits nails, and he's sued them, I think, hasn't he? And he's still happy. It drives him absolutely potty. And you can see why, because for him, as for many of us, but in his case, more than almost anybody else in the public eye, reputation is everything. Trust and reputation is absolutely everything. And these scammers ride roughshod over it. They steal it from him. So what I'd like you to do is start at the position where I was once, of thinking, so I had my identity stolen, but I don't think there's anything you can do about that. That's when someone clones your card without you noticing in a petrol station or something like that, and then the next thing you know, someone's taken 600 quid out of a bank in Canada. I want you to start from the position that you thought you were too clever. All right, can we do it that way? I know probably everybody thought they were too clever, but would it be reasonable for me to suggest that you possibly even are or were a bit arrogant. And if there are any subjects upon which I am truly an expert, it would probably be arrogance. So you thought you were far too clever, not just a bit too, you thought you were far too clever to fall for any of these scams. You'd hear Martin Lewis on the show talking about it, and you'd think, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely awful. But to be fair, if you're going to fall for something like that, then up to a point, you've only got yourself to blame. You thought you were far too clever to fall for a sort of online fraud or this new wave of scams that saw fraudsters steal apparently £700 million in April alone. Hardly any of them are reported to the police, presumably through a curious sense of shame and impotence. And what fascinates me the most is the people who thought they were too clever for this. All right, that's what I want. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. So you've been a victim of a fraud, you've been a victim of a scam, and you still can't quite believe it because you're not the sort of person who gets scammed. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And I listen, I'm not going to be calling anybody stupid or credulous or gullible or any of those things, but I think I should warn you in advance. There might be a little meter ticking in the back of my brain, and that will simply be this question. I will probably be subconsciously wondering whether I could have fallen for the thing that you fell for. And the most powerful call today will be the one that makes me think, yeah, fair play, that could have been me. That could have been me. Because right now, I'm very cocky, and I don't think I'd fall for any of these things. But if you did, and you persuade me that I could have done, we'll have done something of a public service together. It is 19 minutes after 11. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and the sophistication deployed in some of these scams is such that it's clearly not fair or right for a git like me to think that you'd only fall for it if you were a bit dozy. But I want to put flesh upon the bones of that knowledge, because I've still got to sort of lean towards the idea. Well, I never. Oh no, Keith might fall for that, but I never would. Let's start with Joe, who's in Manchester. Joe, what do you reckon?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
This is the first time I've ever called,
Thank you.
I'm pretty nervous, but I do listen to you when I'm at work.
Top man.
So I was targeted...
Why don't you hang on a minute? Why don't you listen to me when you're at home?
I just have you in the background when I'm working from home.
What do you mean in the background? This isn't going well at all. You only listen to me. You have me in the background when you're at home, but you concentrate more when you're at work because it takes your mind off the job in hand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. No, you carry on. That's absolutely great. Well, so talk to me about the scam that you fell for.
I would always have myself down as someone who would not be targeted by scams.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a relatively educated person.
Yes.
So essentially, I started a new job. It was a second job, so I was made redundant from my graduate position.
Right.
Because of COVID.
Right, you are, yes.
So I started a new job right in the middle of COVID. Obviously, starting a job is a really nervous thing.
Yes.
This is the first time I've ever talked about this, so
okay.
I'm going to talk quite slowly.
You take your time.
So I work for, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I work for a marketing agency.
Okay.
And we do a lot of sort of promotional marketing, and we send out prizes to people. I think it was my second day. I got an email from someone. Obviously, all this is from working from home, so I'm not in an office. I've not got someone behind me. And it was an email, and I was working on a promotion for Amazon vouchers.
Right.
And I got an email from my boss, and it was like, I need to send over some Amazon vouchers to a winner, £400. So I went to the co-op. And got these Amazon vouchers, sent them over, thinking I was doing the right thing.
Right.
And it turned out that it was my boss. So it just shows how
would they have known that you were working on that account?
I think it was purely probably coincidence. They have done some research into the agency.
They could see on LinkedIn where you worked or something like that, or?
Yeah. So my boss said that maybe they looked at my LinkedIn profile.
God. And why?
Seeing that I was starting a new position, and then targeted me that way.
Good grief! You sometimes think, Joe, that if people put the effort into doing something legal that they put into doing something illegal, they'd have quite successful careers. Don't you? You think,
yeah.
Why would you spend your own? Did you spend your own money on the vouchers?
Yes.
Why would you do that? So I'm not being pernickety. I'm just intrigued.
I literally think about that all the time,
right.
And thankfully I've got over it now. So I'm sort of going over all round.
Of course.
But I've always wanted to call in and thought,
this is a good one to start with.
I want to speak to about. So. Yeah.
Well, you're in a new job. You're not going to ask questions. You think it's from your boss. That's the point, isn't it? So some of the little alarm bells that would have gone off don't go off.
Yeah.
Because it's an odd thing for your boss to ask you to do, but it's a new job, and especially, mate, you were absolutely rinsed, weren't you? Because you're also conscious of having lost your last job. So the last thing you want to do in your first week in the new job is kick off or start asking questions. Hang on a minute, you don't want to be that person, do you?
Yeah. In respect, I should have thought about it more, but it's one of those things that you've just got to learn from.
Yeah.
I
think well, there you go. Only one call in, and I think in exactly the circumstances you describe, if I had that recent redundancy in my rearview mirror, I think I could easily have been where you were. Just think, I don't want to rock the boat. I'll go out and do it, and then it'll all go through. And I presume you never got refunded or recompensed.
No, thankfully, I wasn't. I'd saved up money and I just took it on the chin. And that's the sort of person that I am. Could have been nice to spend that £400 elsewhere.
Of course,
it's a lot of money.
They got it.
A week. That's a month's rent for me. No, a week.
You're not in London, Joe.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not a positive person, so I didn't take it too to heart.
You sound like a lovely bloke. How's the new job working out?
So I've been there sort of a year and a half. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Good. Excellent.
And literally, the company has put procedures in place to stop it happening again, which is all you can ask for. But it's just one of those things, I think, and it just shows that me, 24 years old, university educated, it can happen to anyone.
I think you're right. I think you've proved it in the first call of the day. I look forward to talking to you again, Joe, on a slightly happier subject, I hope. But there you go. I mean, the detail, the specifics of that are astonishing, aren't they? And you look me in the eye and tell me that if you were in exactly the situation Joe was in, you wouldn't have fallen for something similar. Mark in Hampshire says, James, I've got a title for your next book, How Not to Be Wronged. That's actually very good, Mark. Well done. Claire's in Walton-on-Thames. Claire, what happened?
So about 10 days ago, I got a text saying that my Apple Pay had been frozen on my phone. I was kind of pretty busy at the time. Thought, oh dear, I don't use it. But I need to sort this out.
Right.
Of course, it was one of those ones with a dodgy link that takes you to a page. It was nothing to do with Apple, but happily put in all my details. Didn't think anything more of it.
When you say all my details, what are we talking?
Address, date of birth, bank details, council code. Yes.
Okay.
Next morning, I then got a text from my bank saying looked like it was a text from my bank, saying there'd been suspicious activity and my bank card had been blocked.
Right.
And I was like, what? Yeah. I was going away for the weekend, thought, oh yes, I need to get this sorted before I go away. So I was on the phone to the bank, asking to speak to the fraud department, explaining what had gone on.
Right.
While I was on the phone to the bank, and they said, oh yeah, we'll get somebody to give you a call back. And as I was on the phone to them, I got this incoming call, and I was like, well, maybe that's the bank.
No.
But let me get it. And they didn't try and say, oh no, I think stay on the phone to us. And of course, it was somebody claiming to be from the bank, from the fraud department, saying, "Oh, how can I help you?" And
that's coincidence, right? That's it's an educated guess that you would be trying to deal with it, and they might ring at the time when you're trying to do it, or shortly afterwards. Or
exactly, yes. So of course he was like, "Oh, we need to set up this new account, and you need to transfer your funds into this new account." And I was kind of like, but he's like, "I'm from the bank, it's fine." And he seems a really nice guy, typically. So yeah, basically, I had the contents of my. You
did it.
Yeah, I did it. But as soon as obviously the second transfer had gone through, he hung up on me, and I thought, well, that's a bit odd.
Yeah.
So I phoned the bank back again, and they're like, no, sorry, it wasn't
Nothing
us.
to do with us. How did you feel at that
Exactly.
precise moment?
Well, I mean, I just felt really stupid, obviously, because you think, you should be able to spot these things. But, you had the confidence that you were speaking to your bank.
Yeah.
And they were going to sort it out for you. And of course, now the bank's like, well, we'll try and get the money back from you. I mean, they have the account details that this, all my money was transferred into my supposed new bank account.
Yes. That always intrigues me. If they've moved it into, I mean, I suppose it could be in the Cayman Islands, could it, or something like that, or?
Well, I mean, I guess because they are so sophisticated, you're giving, they give you this new account number and sort code.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did think at the time, that doesn't fit like the sort of, how sort codes are all stopped.
This is the bit I'm being a slightly hard taskmaster for obvious reasons on this. So this is the bit in your story that I don't want to gloss over. It's that you were quite casual.
Oh yeah.
First of all, with the Apple Pay.
I fully hold my hands up and say.
I don't want you to beat yourself up. I'm sure you've done loads of that already. But in terms of helping other people avoid a similar fate, were you just distracted? Were you busy? Yeah,
I mean, I got this text. So I'm cooking dinner. I'm thinking, I need to get that sorted. Going away for the weekend. Didn't think of the repercussions. And you hear about other scams. Sort of COVID jab scams and, you get all these emails about, free gift cards. But this is on another level.
Can I ask how much you lost?
A couple of £1,000.
Do you know if you're going to get it back?
I hope I will.
So do I. At least you've still got your sense of humour. Did you get away for the weekend in the end?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
There's another. Well, that's another one. Now I do see how I'm getting a much clearer picture of how it happened, and the two calls we've taken so far are really nailing the ease with which just by taking your eye off, because you sort of think it's going to be someone wearing someone who looks like Nigel Farage, like a real spiv, coming in and offering to sell you a timeshare or something like that. Although I suppose an awful lot of people fell for Nigel Farage, didn't they? So maybe it's not the best example. Someone who looks like Boise out of Only Fools and Horses. I don't know, but that's why Claire said he sounded like a lovely person. Lottie makes a really good point with Joe up in Manchester, who paid his own money for vouchers, which I picked up on. But as Lottie points out, I've done things like that before, James, especially when working remotely, because you're not in the office, so you don't have the usual methods in place. And then I've been refunded from petty cash or reimbursed in my paycheck. Sometimes it's just expediency. So I can totally see how it happens. So more reason for Joe not to beat himself up. And I know he didn't say this, but quite a few people suggesting that his employer possibly could have helped him out a bit with that £400 loss. You sort of, I don't know. I mean, how many employers give us money that they don't have to give us? It is 11:30. Dominic Ellis is here now with your headlines. It is 11:32. Quite a few of you pointing out, and I don't think you can over-egg this particular pudding, so I'm happy to reiterate, or indeed to amplify, but no bank will ever ask you to move your money from your account. It is obviously intrinsic to some of these scams, but it's not something that your real bank would ever do. So that's one alarm bell that Claire obviously should have heeded, but hey-ho. Who can really hear these stories and say, no, I definitely wouldn't have done that. And listen, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I'm not interested in how clever you are or the hilarious things you do to take up the time of these scammers or whistling down the phone or whatever it may be. It's great and crack on and do it, but it's really not the sort of thing you'd want me to include in this conversation if you had been the victim of a scam, is it? Philip's in Bracknell. Philip, what would you like to say?
I'm a chartered accountant. I had a client who was scammed and eventually committed suicide.
Oh, no.
And then my brother-in-law was scammed on investments, and we can't convince him that they were necessarily scams.
Oh. You've reminded me.
January,
sorry, carry on.
In January, I was scammed.
What happened?
I went on to a local newspaper website.
Yes.
A pop-up competition was offered.
Yeah.
I answered the questions. It was said to be free. And at the end of it, they asked me to pay £1 towards the newspaper funds.
Right.
As I wasn't a subscriber. And I entered my bank details.
What did they get away with, Philip?
My bank, spotted it and stopped the transaction before it went through.
What were they trying to get? Do you know? Did they tell you?
I never found out because I don't know whether it was £1 or £10,000.
No. Well, I mean, you mentioned that you're a chartered accountant at the outset, which makes this story even more surprising than it would otherwise be. How do you account for your carelessness, if that's the right word to use?
Didn't remember that it was a free competition when they asked me to pay the £1.
But putting in your bank details.
Yep, the £1 request was reasonable.
That's the clever bit of the con, isn't it? Because you think, it's only £1.
Yeah, and it was because I thought I was dealing with the website.
Yeah, of course.
Because I went into the website.
That's part of this investigation, is that there's a curious loophole that means that newspaper has absolutely nothing to do with what appears on the bottom of their website, as you will now have discovered.
It was a pop-up attached to their website.
Right.
And I notified their security department afterwards.
There's not a lot they can do about it.
I never got a report back.
No. Yeah. Because what you've reminded me of is probably where some of my lack of sympathy came from in the olden days, because I've always thought of these things as people thinking that they were going to make a lot of money getting ripped off, in which case greed is quite a big factor.
Yeah.
That's probably
that
true
was
of your
brother-in-law's position, yes.
But not your former client.
Not my former. Well, he was trying to invest in gold, and it was 20 years ago.
Oh, I see. Oh, that was the old school, if you like, of scamming. It's always the same scam, isn't it? It just comes back in different forms and different shapes. And briefly, your brother-in-law is still in denial, is he?
I think he's accepted he's not going to get his money back.
Right.
But he does keep trying to get these people who offer to get it back for him.
Oh, Lordy. And there it is. I mean, if you're a chartered accountant and you can fall for a pop-up scam like that, or even the brother-in-law of a chartered accountant who's saying to you, look, this is what I do. It could be there, but for the grace of God type stuff. 11:37 is the time. Millie's in Epping. Millie, what would you like to say? What happened to you? Hello.
Yeah, so it was an interesting one. I was explaining to your colleague earlier.
I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah. So essentially I work from home, and one of the weeks I had loads of meetings in London to get to. Wake up at 7 a.m. and the first thing I see on my phone is that I've got a text that is saying that I've got tested positive for COVID.
Right.
I clicked through the link thinking, gosh, I'm going to have to cancel all my meetings. And it was literally just a week after they've stopped the free lateral flow test, if you remember. So I thought, okay, I'll click through. It looked like an NHS website, and it said, well, now you have to pay for them. And I thought, well, that sounds about right, because they're not giving them for free anymore.
Yeah.
So I go through, put my details. It looks like an NHS website, and having ordered lateral flow tests before, I've just done the same thing. Instantly, first of all, I thought, well, NHS knows my details, but go on then, I'll just pop it in again.
Right.
So it was everything, my name, address, phone number, everything, date of birth, my whole identity. And then in the end, it says you need to pay £5.50 or whatever it is. So I do that, I pay for it, wake up, and my partner's next to me, and I said, well, apparently I've got COVID, and show him the text.
Shouldn't you have told him that before you went to bed together?
Yeah. Well, the text was in the morning, the first thing I've seen.
Yeah.
And he sort of goes, well, that looks like a scam.
Oh, no.
And I didn't think it was for a good 10 minutes. So I call up my bank. They confirm, it's a scam. They stop the transaction. But then my bank says, well, be on the lookout now, because it's a fairly small amount of money that they've asked you for. We've stopped the transaction, and they've put extra security on my account. And they said, well, somebody will give you a call in a couple of days' time and pretend that they're your bank. And I thought, okay, so I was really vigilant. And then a couple of days later, 9 o'clock at night, surely I get a call saying, hi, we're calling from Lloyd's Bank, and we've seen some suspicious activity on your account. And I said, okay, well, what was this suspicious activity? And they said, well, somebody's trying to take the money out of your account, so we want to give you a safe account to put your money in.
Oh, wow.
Anything.
It's the same one.
Anyway.
Did you fall for it?
No,
because you'd had the warning in place.
Luckily my bank talked me through.
Oh, you're the opposite of Claire almost. You just got you there in the nick of time.
Yeah. So, but it was kind of the timing that really got me, because lateral flow tests.
No, that's the bit. That's what I meant. Just before you came on, I've got the Mayor Sadiq Khan on the other line, so I'm going to have to crack on. But just before you came on, it's always the same scam. They just change the tone of it. They change the context. And I mean, who wouldn't have responded to a text saying you've got COVID? At that time, just around the time those tests stopped being free, of course you're going to have your guide. They're clever. Look, they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't, and they wouldn't be making this sort of money if they weren't. Some people who fall for it are gullible. What I think we're learning this hour is some people who fall for it are not. I don't know how many people have signed up for tickets for the Indigo at the O2 tomorrow night, because it is actually sold out, but I hope there aren't any online scammers out there who've signed up for tickets, because if there are, me and Sadiq Khan could be talking to an empty hall, because we're doing it again, the State of London debate at the O2 Indigo tomorrow night, which we will be broadcasting live, so you'll be able to catch it, even if you haven't been able to get a ticket. If I were sitting here, Sadiq Khan, toying with the idea of attending or tuning in, how would you persuade me that would be a wise use of my time?
Hey, good morning, James. It's lovely to speak to you, and more importantly to your listeners. So tomorrow's event is going to be a hybrid event. So if you've not got a ticket for tomorrow evening, and I know it's sold out. Genuinely, it is sold out.
It is free. I just want to make that clear. I mean, all the tickets have been, but I think using sold out is a little bit cheeky on our part. But
the gig next door, Alana Morissette, she definitely sold out. But when I say we're sold out, what I mean is those that could register for a ticket. Isn't that ironic? Yeah, no, those that could register for a ticket, that's now passed, I'm afraid. But you can register to watch online, but also they can through you using the hybrid way we do stuff now. Through you, ask questions of me, and actually, as importantly, if not more importantly, my deputy mayors as well. And you and I have done this before, before the pandemic, and I'm sure you'll agree it is a wonderful evening. I mean, obviously I get very nervous because obviously I've got to deal with the questions and the debate and the points raised. But it is lovely having people from across our wonderful city, taking the time out to come to, the Indigo O2 and asking me questions, but also giving you and me comments, and the deputy mayors who do an incredibly hard job. They do respond, and you make sure we respond to every point raised. And the wonderful thing about it is genuinely a good night out. But the team that help you do make sure that people have their questions asked, and listeners who listen to you on a daily basis will know you really do give me and my deputy.
Well, the tougher the questions people submit, the more fun I have. Actually, let's not beat about the bush. It's much more enjoyable for me to hold your feet to the fire than it is to give you underarm bowls that you and your deputies can easily bat away. That should be obvious.
Yeah, one person's fun is one person's anxiety, stress, trauma, and all the rest of it and stuff. But just to remind your listeners, what you do is often you're quite strict on making sure you have questions on transport, questions on policing and safety, questions on air quality and environment, housing, economy with our recovery and so forth. And what you try and do is make sure there's a fair amount of time for each topic. And that's why I mentioned my deputy mayors, because often what happens is you stop me waffling on and you just get my deputy mayor to come in and answer specifically on a question which is, damages my ego, but it means that the punters get an answer to a question they've raised.
Indeed they do, and you can submit your questions via the website at lbc.co.uk. Have you? Can I tell people about your riders, or would that be indiscreet of me? The backstage demands that you make every time we do this. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, whatever.
I have you, a word on the industrial action as a lawyer. I mean, former professional, but you never stop being a lawyer, even when you become a politician.
Can I just go back a step to explain to your listeners who may think all lawyers, live in these plush houses and earn obscene amounts of money? Legal aid was part of the welfare state. One of the principles that the wise founders of the welfare state had was everyone should have access to justice. So if you, heaven forbid, are arrested, you should be able to have a qualified lawyer to assist you to ensure you receive a fair trial. And the victim of a crime has confidence then the right person is found guilty, and somebody who shouldn't be found guilty is not found guilty, and the police can then go about and find the guilty person. And my experience from I've got family members who work in criminal defence law is legal aid in criminal defence work has been going down, not even staying the same with high inflation, been going down. Fewer and fewer people are choosing to do criminal law, either as solicitors or barristers. And it's got to a stage now where, solicitors firms and barristers chambers are saying no to taking on certain types of work. And that should worry us all, James, because you and I are old enough to remember the Guildford 4, the Birmingham 6, the Maguire 7, the M25 3, the Cardiff 3. So miscarriages of justice often occur when people aren't properly represented. And that's why it's so important for this Justice Secretary, and it gives me pain to say it's Dominic Raab, is the Justice Secretary, for him to understand this is not greedy lawyers wanting more money. These are public servants, who do criminal legal aid work, the least well-paid legal aid work, wanting a fair, day's pay for a fair day's work.
So you're supportive,
so
you're supportive of the industrial action? I am listening.
I'm supportive of our nurses, our teachers, our transport workers, those working in the public services who, for the last 12 years, have seen austerity. And what they want is, the places they work in. Are you
giving me a politician's answer? I am concentrating. I am listening. Are you supportive of the industrial action being taken today by barristers?
I support the industrial action being taken today by those, criminal barristers.
Will you get into trouble with Keir Starmer for saying that?
No, listen, I know they're at the end of their tether. Listen, nobody likes strikes. These guys, these men and women, don't want to go and strike. I've seen them, because I used to be one of them, that they work above and beyond. They work 7 days a week, many of them. Many of them are doing 2-3 cases a day. Many of them are really worried about the fact there's no junior barristers, becoming criminal barristers. There are no junior solicitors becoming criminal solicitors. And that should worry all of us, because, fair enough, you and I can probably afford to pay for a lawyer. There are many people across this country that can't. And you'll remember, by the way, that the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, Nigel Evans, was on record as saying him defending himself in that case. He was acquitted, almost bankrupt him. Right? And that's somebody who's got a well-paid job as a member of Parliament. And this is why, it's really important for us to understand there's a reason why we've got a welfare state. And, I'm not being funny. You don't become a teacher or a nurse or a transport worker or a criminal defence lawyer to become rich, right? And so that's why when you asked the question at the beginning, they're at the end of their tether.
They are. We've spoken to several today. Thank you for your straight answer. I won't be veering off the topics tomorrow, because the audience is coming to hear from the Mayor of London and the Deputy Mayors about, indeed, the state of London, which is what the debate is called. So I thought I'd slip that in while I had your attention. I won't be going off the London agenda tomorrow evening at the Indigo at the O2 in Peninsula Square. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, many thanks. You can sign up to hear more news from the website. You can also listen to the debate exclusively on LBC News. That's our sister station, or accessible through the DAB digital radio or your smart speaker. And this year you can watch it live as well. I hadn't realised that. No one actually asked me about that. No, I haven't said that. I can't pull out now, but that means I'm going to have to buy a suit or something. Oh no, I can't turn up in my pyjamas. You can watch it live on Global Player, via Global Player, which I really would urge you not to do, because I'm joking. You should. I haven't agreed to that. Keith, get my agent on line 2. 11:52 is the time. There's some astonishing footage. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on this. There's some footage of Boris Johnson arriving at his hotel at this summit, getting out of a Range Rover and then jogging towards the photographers. But it's so crass and so, obviously going to get filmed. Either he's gone completely crackers or he had been for a jog already. So they drove to wherever he jogged in the car and then came back and he just jogged. It's the most tragic advertisement for this country, isn't it? He gets out of a Range Rover and then jogs towards the hotel entrance, waving at photographers, and he pretends that he doesn't have any proper PE kit, so he wears his black shoes or whatever it is. And he's been doing that photo trick. He's been running that shtick for 20 years now. Slightly less easy to defend is this exchange, which I'm trying to check the audio. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play it to you. He sat down at the G7 summit and started talking about how important it is to show their pecs. We all have to show that we're tougher than Putin. It's just breathtaking, really. There's nothing left. Trudeau joins in. I make of that what you will. What a bizarre business. 11:53 is the time. Back to scams. I have changed. I'm glad we did it this way round. But was it last year? I don't know if that is recent footage, actually. Julie is suggesting that might have been last year. That's the problem with doing pictures on the radio. I think we've done this the right way round. I don't know that we've heard any story that makes us feel smug and superior and it couldn't happen to us, which is my fault, because in the past, whenever we've done scams, I think the reason why I went off the subject was that two things happen. Number one, you get a little bit distracted by people boasting about how clever they are and how they deal with it. And number two, some of the stories you hear are greed-based, and greed-based stories do not conjure up the same level of sympathy. So this has been really helpful. Tom's in Brixton. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hi. So I used to work for a company about 3 years ago, and we had a consultant we used to work with who needed to send us a bill to pay his invoice, essentially. Yeah. And I used to work in a finance team for this company.